Hey, Hare Krishna. Welcome back. We're actually on part 8. We are nearing the end of this section. This is my final part in my personal story. Well, in regards to this presentation, it's the final part of my personal story. I would like to point out an interesting fact in regard to the question of whether this ongoing proxy initiation by a Rtvik Representative system violates scriptural injunctions. I don't recall exactly when, if it was in the late 1990s or into the 2000s, but at one point the GBC commissioned a committee of devotees who all supported the GBC position that the Rtvik-RAS path was completely bogus. These devotees were commissioned by the GBC to research not only Srila Prabhupada's books and teachings, but they would have researched the entire Vedas, the works of the Goswamis, the past acaryas, etc., to see if they could find any direct scriptural injunction prohibiting an ongoing Rtvik representative form of initiation. The GBC wanted to find an injunction that would directly or even indirectly oppose it, such as an injunction that specifically stated that the guru has to be physically present or living in his vapu form in order to accept disciples. The GBC had been proclaiming for years that the Rtvik-RAS path was Apasiddhanta, that it went against the scriptural injunctions. So the GBC commissioned those devotees to search and come up with proof that the GBC was right about this. It would also give the GBC ammunition. It would give them a quote from scripture to show that this is actually bogus. However, after an exhaustive search, the committee came up empty-handed. They had to report to the GBC that they had not found one single direct or even indirect injunction that could be used to prove that the Rtvik representative system violated scripture or violated an instruction by a previous acharya. Again, this committee consisted 100% of devotees who themselves were opposed to the Rtvik-RAS idea. Since they themselves were opposed to the idea, when they came up empty-handed, they still wanted to write a report that the GBC could use to help defeat the supporters of the Rtvik-RAS camp. So they wrote that not every sort of just bizarre thing anyone could imagine is dealt with directly in scripture. I don't recall the exact example they gave, but they gave some really off-the-wall stupid idea. And I'm going to give my own off-the-wall stupid idea. It's probably not the example they gave, but for some reason, it's what came to my mind. Say some guru starts preaching that Krishna has instructed him to inform everyone that from now on, in order to get the full spiritual benefit of chanting japa, you have to wear clown makeup and clothing, and dress up like a clown. Otherwise, the chanting of japa will have no spiritual effect. Well, just because there is no injunction in all of the Vedic literature or any past acharya which specifically forbids this, that doesn't mean that we should accept it. And yes, when an idea is that bizarre, it's so bizarre, this point is that point is well made and it's well taken. In the report, they stated that it's up to intelligent members to look at things like this that are not specifically mentioned in scripture and use our common sense to determine, if something is so bizarre, then yes, it should be rejected. Not just because scripture has no injunction directly rejecting such a bizarre idea that it should be accepted. Again, those points are well taken. So they reported that just because they couldn't find any specific injunctions forbidding a guru from giving initiation without being physically present in his vapu form doesn't mean that it is bona fide. Where we do not agree, however, is with their claim that this Rtvik representative system is bizarre. There are other devotees who are just as intellectual as those devotees who don't find the process bizarre at all. We take this most seriously. Rather, what we find to be bizarre is the Vapuvada philosophy that claims that the spiritual potency for giving spiritual initiation is empowered not by the eternal transcendental Vani of the Guru, but rather by the temporary Vapu form of the Guru. That we find to be bizarre. And we also find it to go against the conclusion of the Vedic scripture and the principles taught by the acaryas. Srila Prabhupada had authorized a system by which he can accept disciples without having to be physically present or involved. And what empowered that system was his own spiritual, eternal spiritual life force, but also his eternal transcendental instructions, his Vani, his teachings. The GBC accept that the system was bona fide, but they claim it became somehow bizarrely invalid once Srila Prabhupada was no longer physically present in his Vapu form. What is really bizarre here is the GBC's so-called logic. The fact is the GBC got the answer to this important question that they had asked. The question was, does the ongoing Rtvik representative system of the Acharya violate scriptural injunctions? The answer to that question that the GBC committee found was a resounding no. No, there are no direct scriptural injunctions that are violated by such a system of initiation. What is of significance is that the GBC subcommittee also found no indirect scriptural injunctions that would be violated by an ongoing initiations via Rtvik representatives. Sure, we agree that the Vedas don't have injunctions about any and all bizarre, off-the-wall ideas. But the underlying basis of the GBC's rejection of this system lies in this Vapuvada philosophy, that it is somehow the Vapu form of the Guru that provides the spiritual potency for him to give initiation. That is a bogus philosophy, where conversely, the philosophy that supports the Rtvik-RAS system is the Vanivada philosophy, which upholds that the spiritual empowerment of the spiritual initiations given by his divine grace is his eternal spiritual life force and his eternal spiritual Vani or instructions. That is what continues to empower the ongoing Rtvik representative of the system of initiations. Thus, I disagree in the strongest terms with this GBC subcommittee, who contend that the ongoing Rtvik system was a bizarre, off-the-wall idea. It is a most serious system that was set up and authorized directly by his divine grace, and therefore it must be given all our respect. There must not be any tolerance to brushing it off as something so bizarre as to compare it to something like chanting japa in a clown suit. And then arguing that, then we have to whimsically reject it. What is so bizarre is the philosophy that it was Srila Prabhupada's Vapu form that empowered his ability to give spiritual initiation. That is what is bizarre. Even though their own subcommittee found no scriptural evidence that an ongoing Rtvik system of initiation was bogus, still, the GBC didn't change their mantra regarding this issue. They continued to call the Rtvik process Apasiddhanta, which specifically means that it goes against the conclusion of Scripture. Over and over again, the GBC have declared the Rtvik representative after Samadhi system of initiation as being a deviant philosophy that had to be smashed at all cost, passing resolution after resolution, demonizing those members who support it as espousing a dangerous, bogus, poisonous philosophy, calling those who support it fallen and envious and deviant, stripping away their leadership roles, at times even formally kicking such members out of their own guru's ashram, taking the Ritviks to court at any and all cost, into the hundreds of millions of dollars of Srila Prabhupada's money to try and defeat what they claimed was a bogus, deviant philosophy, at any and all cost. Yet all these years, the GBC have been unable to give one single quote, not one single scriptural reference that supports their blatant claim that this is a deviant philosophical concept that goes against scriptures and the teachings of the Acharya of our line. Nothing. Think about this. For decades and decades, the GBC have proclaimed this idea as being philosophically deviant and bogus, and that it goes against our scriptures. And yet, during all those decades, they have never, not once, cited one single direct verse from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, or any other Vedic scripture, nor any single quote from any past acharya that directly supports this damning claim. If they had ever found even one such quote or verse, they would have been quoting it nonstop as a means to back up their claims. But they haven't done this because they can't. There is no such quote or verse that backs up and supports their wildly concocted claims. One thing they have been claiming is that if they allow Srila Prabhupada, like they are the ones that are his doorkeepers or something. But anyway, they claim if they allow Srila Prabhupada to keep initiating disciples via the system that he had set up and authorized, that it would mark an end to the disciplic succession. But that is a blatantly false statement that they themselves are making, which again has no scriptural evidence to back it up. Any of Srila Prabhupada's disciples can start their own ashram and take their own disciples if they have Srila Prabhupada's direct blessings in order to do so. But they have to do so in their own separate ashram, not within ISKCON, because as I've pointed out, trying to force fit real spiritual masters, real gurus, who can give instructions to their disciples, and their disciples have to accept those instructions without any other consideration and immediately carry them out, which is the proper system of a real guru and disciple relationship. But they can't do that within ISKCON where there is GBC and where that guru is not the absolute authority, the ultimate authority within the ashrams where they function. There are other authorities, and where do they fit into the system? They don't fit into the system that Srila Prabhupada had set up.